Hi, welcome to this watercolor tutorial brought to you in part by Birdwatching Academy and Camp. Those of you that are watching this video and decide to go over and check out Birdwatching Academy and Camp, if you put a comment below and let me know that you went and checked them out, then the painting that I did of this beautiful bird will go to one of my followers that did that. So check out Birdwatching Academy and Camp. Thank you so much and enjoy the tutorial. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to reactivate this orange that's in my palette. You'll notice that I'm using a half of praying half pan, and I'm mixing in some orange, mixing it with blue, just reactivating some of those colors that I used on a previous painting. If you mix 2 parts orange and 1 part blue, you'll get a brown. It's actually kind of a burnt umber, kind of a nice brown color. And you'll actually notice that I'm using a ton of water and hardly any paint. I want to keep it really light when you start out. I want it to have some texture and some flow, and so I'm going to add in some darker spots, lighter spots, and push it around in this wetted area. This is a wet on wet, and there's going to be some areas down lower that I didn't get to with the just plain water. So I'm going to add some more water to that area to make it more of a wet on wet look. But it's just this nice brown. It has a little bit of an orange hue to it. And so I'm going to mix in some additional blue. Blue and orange are complementary colors. Complementary colors allow you to make beautiful grays and browns and different earthy colors. So even though I'm using this really inexpensive praying half pan, it really does allow you to have any color you want if you understand how to mix them. So there's some lighter areas here that I wanted to keep light, so I just dabbed a tissue right there. And I'm going to put in some yellow up on the upper left side here. So my reference image is actually from another YouTuber, or a YouTuber that does watercolor tutorials, Emily Olson. Um, I'll put a link to her channel at the end of this video and in the comments. Go ahead and check those out. And as always, like, subscribe, comment, interact with me as much as you can. We want to make sure that if there's any chance that this will be able to become one of a revenue stream for me so that I can continue to teach public school. I put some blue into the tail and into the bottom part of the bird's chest so that it will kind of start my visualization of those values that will be coming in later. I want to keep it light at first. This is how you layer in your values. With watercolor, you want to just go slowly. Just do it slowly. If you jump in and just put in the darks right up front, then it bleeds into everything else. But if you slowly layer in the colors, it actually helps you be able to do what you want to do later on by adding additional layers. So I'm going to throw some red up in here, and that will help me be able to kind of bring more vibrancy. But you'll notice that it's a pink color, and I don't have pink, as you can see. I'm actually just adding more and more water to it to keep it. I wanted a yellow-orange color, so I added some yellow to that orange that was there. You'll notice that I rarely pull something straight out of the palette. The palette's colors are very primary and very, um, well, primary is a good word, like elementary, and so I don't want my painting to look like an elementary student did it, so I'm using, mixtures of different colors, even though I have the basics there. And you'll notice that I haven't touched the brown and the black. Those colors are rarely ever used. Now, I like to tell my students, "Don't use black, mix your own." How would you mix your own? Well, it's red, blue, and yellow. Those 3 colors are the primaries that make every other color. If you mix equal parts of those, you'll actually get a black color. And if you don't mix them equally, it'll be kind of a muddy brown. And so it's still pretty cool to be able to kind of see what colors make how much of each would create the color you're looking for. Now, even though I say don't use black, I'm using my own mixture that I have in the palette that I mixed the primary colors together. But at the very end, I'm gonna give you this bird is the master class in how to utilize black in the right way. And so we will be using black straight out of the palette coming up. I'm adding in some values and kind of trying to be able to visualize where the feet are going to connect to the branch and how I'm going to get that branch to kind of stand out and but not so much that it takes away from the focal point. The focal point, in my opinion, should be the bird's face and the eye of the bird. So I'm just going to put some of these shadows. Now I'm still using the the red, blue, yellow mixture that was in the center of my palette from a previous painting to make these shadows. Later on, I'm going to layer on a layer of black in the darkest darks. Watercolor boils down to value. If you can see the value, you've won. But you have to have the ability to be patient enough to put in the midtones around those whites of the paper, keeping the white of the paper as the lightest color. Patience is key with watercolor, and that's why so many, elementary school kids can't grasp the aspect of patience. Luckily, I do always have at least a handful of students in each of my classes that are able to do it because they're seventh graders. And so seventh graders are um, beyond elementary school. At least they hope they are, you know. So you'll notice that I'm putting in some of the midtones, even though I know this is going to be black. I want to be able to layer the black on top of this, leaving some of these shadowy midtones to come through to make the black have depth. If it's just pitch black, it just ruins the painting. If it has some texture and depth to it, that's accomplished by leaving some of the gray or the shadowy mixture coming through and putting some darker blacks on top, but not just painting the entire thing. You'll see that most of this painting I've been painting negatively, which means I painted the background first, and now I'm painting what's behind the stick to make the stick appear. You're using the shadows in the background to make what's in the foreground actually appear. I'm just still putting in some of those midtones, a little bit darker than the paint that's there already. Just putting in, and I'm squinting at the reference image. You do a lot of squinting. Underneath the chin is black, but I'm still going to put in some of this. Notice how I'm putting it in with a texture by touching and pulling and tapping the brush. I'm not just painting in big broad strokes. I'm painting in little push pull strokes, barely touching the paper. As I tell my students, the paintbrush is the steering wheel, but you can't move without the engine. The engine is the water, and you don't need very much paint in the water for it to run. So it's just, gasoline gets put into the tank, which is the bowl, and then the fumes, just a tiny bit of gasoline, or those fumes get pulled and put on the paper, and the steering wheel steers it as the water moves it. So controlling the amount of water you have on your brush is so important, especially right here when I'm doing this little detail of the eye. I'm going to leave a little highlight circle in there. And my brush is pretty dry, and I'm just rolling it into the paint. And I move the black out of the paint palette onto the mixing area so that I could have less of a stark black. I don't want to go black until the very end. And I'll do it with a dry brush technique where there's a little bit of water in the paint itself, but the brush will be dry, and I'll just roll the tip of the brush like this, and then it's going to be black. But my brush is dry so that it's not pushing the paint. I could write on a piece of paper with cursive, beautiful writing with my brush in this position. You'll notice also that my brush is at a sharp tip. I put it at a sharp tip by rolling it into the paint, and that put a tip on it so that I can get really fine details. And as I'm moving away from the eye, you'll notice that my brush is losing the paint, so it's getting lighter. And now I'm using some of that lighter paint from the mixing area to match that my brush has lost that paint. I'm still not going jet black. This is a gray. I'm keeping it gray. The only jet black part was the eye, right there in that little eye. So I'm putting in some small detailed feathers that because it goes from black into a white area, and then I'm going to push it up into the top of the bird's head, which has a little bit of a highlight, so it's going to be even a little bit lighter than that lower area. Notice how I'm just doing little dashes and little pushes. That's how you get the texture of the feathers. And I'm barely touching the paper. You don't want to push hard on your brush. It'll ruin your brush. You don't want to push hard on the paper because it will cause it to ball up, especially if it's a cheaper paper. It'll ball up and then it will rip through ultimately if you put too much water and too much. It's like sandpaper. You're just sanding the paper down. So be careful not to overwork watercolor areas. These small little movements, even though they're tedious, they help create the texture that your brain will actually see as the feathers. Now I'm bringing a little bit of shadow out on the beak. The beak itself on the upper part has a highlight of light, but the lower part is actually in the shadow, and so it keeps its dark black. So I'm going to put in the lower part's going to be darker. Still, I'm nowhere near as dark as it will be because I take it slow. This is a master class in using black. You take it slow and you use grays over the entire area and layer in. And then at the very, very end, you'll find the blackest blacks and put it in at that point. So I'm putting in some feathers in the white area to give it some texture, but I'm using a very empty brush so that when I make a mark, it's not super dark, it's gray and it has very little paint. That's the trick. And then I figured that's too dark, so I'm gonna put some water on it. I'm gonna spread it around so it becomes a shadow, but it's still too dark. So I dried my brush, and I'm gonna go and pull, using my dry brush, I'm gonna erase some of that shadow. So you can use your brush as an eraser if it's clean and dry, and the area that you're trying to clean is clean with clean water, wet. So dry your brush, pull that clean water, it'll pull some of that darkness out. You can do it with a paper towel also, just like this. And that helps lighten it up. If you go too dark too fast, you got to do it quickly though, because if you don't get it off fast enough, it will permanently be there if it dries too much. And you can't get rid of all of it if it's black, because black stains the paper. Just getting some shadows in here. This is black, but it has a ton of water and it just keeps it light and shadowy. Underneath the chin of this bird, there's a really dark area. So I'm going to just be brave and stick some of that in right now. But it transitions, so I don't want to get rid of my shadow transition. So I'm bringing this down another layer, another value. Now we're getting into a 6 or a 7 on the value scale of 1 being white, 8 being black. Think of everything you do as value. It's so important. It's the number one thing in watercolor is seeing the value. This is the stage where everything looks like it's not working. In watercolor, you always hit this stage where everything looks terrible. Just trust the process. Keep going, layer it in, softly layer it in. Notice how I have my brush almost empty and I'm using it to pull from areas that are already black, and so it's fading in to the lighter areas. I got some paint on my brush and I know that right there on the tail is a really dark area. So I test it in those dark areas first so that I don't mess up in areas that I can't recover from where it's supposed to be lighter. So pull that down, lighten it up here, making that outside tail. It's probably gonna have to go back into the background in a minute and darken up the background a little bit to match that outside of the tail. I lost the blue color, so I'm gonna go put some more blue in there. I liked having a little bit of blue. Put some blue up here too. Kind of blend it in here. So this part is gonna be a lot darker. It's not there yet, so I'm gonna get some darker area here. Now again, this is just a basic set. You can make wonderful watercolors, even if you don't have the money. Um, you can make some wonderful watercolor paintings with all the dollar stuff. Even like you can go to the dollar store or just inexpensive off of online. Now, obviously, if you want to get serious, um, i- if you're not sure at all, go ahead and just get a basic set. And if you think you're wanting to get serious, go, still start out with a basic, inexpensive set and have some fun. Get practicing. Um, I'm throwing some yellow in to make it feel warmer. Uh, I really want it to feel alive, and yellow helps with that, especially since that's the side where the light's coming from is over there on the left, up above, and so the stick is going to have the shadows below on the right. This is the space between the 2 feet, and this is the darker area that I'm putting in to make up for that side of the um, tail. And these are some details. This is brown. I think it just took it right out of the palette here, which is rare. But you'll notice that as I keep going, it gets lighter and lighter the more area that I make it move across, and the more water that gets with it, the lighter it becomes, and it looks more natural and earthy when it's lighter. It's a little too dark. Just dab that up. But I'm using the negative space or the background to actually create the feet and the stick. And this side of the body is very light, and so I don't want to draw a outline because that would make it look like a cartoon. So I'm just going to darken up the background because the only reason we see lines or outlines is because a lighter area is touching a darker area. And where they meet, our brain creates a line. So instead of drawing the line, let's just let our brain create it by making the background darker than the foreground. You're stealing some of this color in there to pull it down, create a shadow. We're still in that ugly stage that where the painting doesn't look like, and it's almost hard to see where it might be going. I'm gonna get some dark blue and put a tiny bit of black with it just because I don't want it to be pitch black yet. That happens at the very end. So I'm gonna start putting in some of the shadows. Now these are not the darkest darks. This is a mid-tone. I roll my brush to get that point. I love having a nice point, and I'm soaking up the paint, which means that my brush is not super wet. If it was wet, it wouldn't soak the paint up. It would actually just leave the paint in the palette. So you have a slightly dried brush. It's like a not quite wet, not quite dry. That allows a little bit of the paint, which is the mid-tone, to get into the brush, and then you can paint that middle gray. And you'll notice that I'm painting and then pulling and pushing, and I'm creating texture in every movement that I make. And I'm painting the shadow of the bird, so that you can see the stick in front of it. There's a knot in the wood there, pulling it down into here. getting that nice, the mid-tone. I'm still not painting the darkest darks. I'm still doing a mid-tone. Need to add, so I just got straight black. I'm getting brave, putting some black, using a dry brush technique to draw where the bird's foot is reaching around and going around the branch. Oh no, too much. How dare I? How am I going to fix it? It's way too dark, too fast. I'm going to have to pull it out. Okay, a little bit more, just dabbing. All right. I let my paper dry for about 5 minutes there while I was taking care of some stuff. So I've lost the opportunity to do any more wet on wet. So I'm going to try to soften up this edge with some just water. I'm not using paint at all. Just wanted to soften up this edge. A little bit of orange. I'm going to darken up the background, which will make it so that you'll be able to see the edge of the tail. That lighter edge of the tail is now visible because I darkened the background. Darken the background here. Put some more background stuff. Make it a little bit more visually colorful. Soften it up. Now's the time that we start to see some of the need for black. So I'm going to go put some black in here so I can have some grays. But I'm going to dry my brush off and then roll it in just straight black. Now I have a pen-like accuracy with the tip of my brush. I'm going to just draw this thin line coming up where the bottom of the stick branch is coming up. I left it broken there on purpose. Then I'm going to do zigzags, some jagged edges, and I'm going to push down on the brush to make a thicker shadow. Put some dots, textures, and just bring it carefully up this bottom edge, and it will make a branch shadow for me. Didn't like how it was kind of hanging out there too much. Now I'm going to come in here and start drawing the details of the feet. Shadow here. Comes in, it comes down kind of sharp and wraps around and underneath. Just trying to mimic the angles where those feet go around that branch. Comes back up this way. You'll notice that's a really thin line up there, and it doesn't connect to anything. It just hangs there, and your brain actually sees the foot and how it connects without that line connecting. It's called an implied line, and watercolor is big on implying where lines are without actually putting them in. And your brain loves that. If you like watercolor, that's one of the reasons. It allows your imagination to see things that aren't there. And some of the shadows here. There's some pretty dark shadows up here. You'll notice that I'm pushing the brush and pulling the brush and creating a texture. This texture that I'm creating. Oh, now that my brush is actually not completely black, it has more of a gray feel. I'm filling in some more of the mid-tone that I see. And so you don't quit painting because your brush is, let me get some brown, which is really rare for me. But I see some brown that I want it to pull. I dried my brush off so that it wouldn't push it too much. I just want the tiniest bit of kind of a shadow of brown there to make the back side of the bird. This is the wing that's sticking out from behind. And there's some feathers that are pulling up, some texture there. The bottom of the stick has a really dark shadow. It has like a little notch there. I want to make sure I get the texture of the stick. I want it to be really sticky. I want the stick to look sticky. Just putting in some texture. It's like that needs to be a little bit lighter. So I just put some water over top of it, just plain water, and dabbed it, and it helped it become more subtle. I'll put a shadow on this little stick that's sticking up, but I don't want it to be black. I want it to be kind of a gray. And this is the part that's like doing a puzzle. You're looking for those shadow shapes and the different variations in value. A little bit more shadow behind it. Let it stick out, but I don't want it to be so stark. So I'm going to stand that up along the stick there. All right, now we're getting down to the point where we need to find every dark and really get it in. We've done all the midtones and lighter stuff. Now it's time to really get in and be brave and throw in some of the blackest blacks. Now, remember, I said don't use black. Well, there's going to be some times when black is the way to go. That's why I have this as the painting that I'm teaching. It's because I want you to be able to use black the right way if you choose to do so. So it's very moderate. And you start in the darkest area and you put it in there and you let your brush start to run out and then you extend it out and flare it so that it's not such a stark contrast. It's not so jarring between the black and the other stuff. This painting is a very light painting, and I'm using a lot of black here to get these little details. But you'll notice I'm doing a dry brush technique to control the amount of water so it doesn't go crazy, as well as allowing my brush to run out of paint, but continue to use it, kind of like when I do my Sharpie marker drawings, where once the Sharpie runs out of its black, I start to use it as midtone so that I can have some shadows, even though it's still all Sharpie. I've done posters that are Sharpies that you can see four values because I'll have, four different mid-tone markers in four different stages of running out of ink. And that way I can get multiple different values. So it's like I'm adding ink to my brush right now, and I don't want to go too dark. So I'm pushing it around in different areas to have it lighten up so that I can slowly add in the dark without it being too dark too fast. So you'll notice my brush is like, I don't know, it's a 4 right now, and it started out as an 8. And see how I can pull these little shadow areas into the white area and it doesn't look so stark because I've let the brush run out of paint so that it can be a really soft mid-tone, like a 2 or 3. And I get some more paint, and I paint in the area that I know I want it to be darker, but I don't start painting in other areas until it's running out of paint. I want it to be a little bit darker, but I'm carefully touching that paint into those darker areas. Slowly building it up. It's starting to look like I want it to. I can see the end. It's in sight. I can imagine what it will look like once I get all the pieces the way that I want them to be. Just getting this a little bit darker on the edge. Go underneath here. Make that stick darker. Make it so your brain knows that the bird's behind the stick too, but I don't want to go super dark. So I'm going to get my brush emptied of all the darkness and make it so I have this mid-tone again. Then I can go underneath and finish up the underside of this beak. Shape it up there. Add some more paint. Test it in a dark area to make sure that it's the value that I want. Make sure I'm doing it in an area that I can't go too dark. It's dark enough that it'll be good. Put in some of this detail. Like my brush is barely touching this paper. Like it's barely touching. I want to get that texture, these little marks to create texture. Now I'm at a mid-tone, so I could go into some more mid-tone area, or I can reload my brush. I just decide I'm going to soften this up a little bit. This is just pure water, pulling it down to soften it up so that it feels more natural. That's just water. I'm going to soften this area up too because those lines are a little bit too dark, a little too drastic and sharp. Soften that up. It also creates a nice shadowy gray. Bring this around. This is just water. I'm just using water to soften things up. It doesn't change much because you're doing it over top of dry paint that's been dried for a while. This underside doesn't look, it's not looking the way I want. So I'm gonna add some darker color to the outside edge to separate the background from the foreground. And I like this red makes it feel kind of, I don't know, Christmassy. I don't know. Just throwing it in there, make it feel, or maybe it's fall. I don't know. But now you can see the back of the bird a little bit better. All right, time to get some black going again. Slowly, meticulously putting this together. It's time to go jet black and make the bird come to life. This is the, you don't paint what you're painting until the very end. You now have the bird, you can see it, and now it's time to bring it to life. You get those black blacks. Look at that eye. Just, you can just see the life in the eye. It just opens up. Carefully, carefully with the sharp tip coming around, leaving white space creates the bird. It's the whole focal point right there. Take your time getting those. There we go. Now we're painting. And you'll notice that I'm still, even though I'm doing really dark darks, still leaving some of that gray that was coming through earlier, making it so that you can still see it. Now I'm going to throw some details over top of this highlighted. It's actually highlighted, though it's really dark, but you can still see the highlight right there. Get the last few finishing touches here. Darken up under the chin and another couple areas. And this bird will be ready to fly away. Really get that foot grabbing onto that stick. Still being very careful with how I'm getting this. Don't want it to be super dark, but I want it to be there. Let's give it some details under here. Some feathers. Going in the back. Carefully get some of these final details. little bit of black signature. Like I said, you can draw really fine lines with the brush if it has a tip. And there you have it. As you peel the tape, make sure your paper's dry and peel it at a 90-degree angle. If you peel it straight up, it'll rip the paper. At a 90-degree angle, it'll still rip a little bit, but it won't ruin your painting. Hope you've enjoyed this long version of this tutorial where I talked way too much, but I hope you enjoyed.